Hi, so I was looking at this video by YouTube user X Heliocentric, and it was about maps, uh, Mandela affected maps. And I saw this really interesting comment, and he's talking about Harry Hubbard has a great video called the Lazaria Map Collection, where he goes through this fantastic collection of maps of the North Pole and the Hudson Bay area. Bit a Mandela effect video, but you could take it that way. What happened to Friesland? You have to ask after watching it, and lots more. Lots of old maps show a big island called Friesland south of Iceland with cities and towns and descriptions of their commerce with England. Maps that get tons of other stuff totally correct. No more Friesland. I have some of these maps, having bought a bunch of map books after watching the video. Also, all the old maps show no ice at the North Pole and four large islands. I thought that was really interesting because I have seen those maps as well, the ones that show no North Pole and four large islands. And also, Friesland struck me because it didn't exist where I'm from, but it exists now, and it is actually moved. It is now a province of the northwest of the Netherlands. So it's moved like the other side of England, because that whole region has gone through a blender. It's all scrambled, like at least to me and people from my memory set of things. Europe looks entirely different to the point of being almost unrecognizable. However, Friesland, I did find, I looked for like the old maps of Friesland to see how far back it went, and I saw when I searched for Friesland old maps, North Pole, I found maps that show the four islands of the North Pole. And I've seen maps like this before, which is crazy because where I'm from, it was ice down to like basically down to this red line. There's just, like ice everywhere, and Greenland was really small, and Svalbard wasn't there. So it's just, it looks so different, and I wonder if some of the things just like Mandela'd out, like some things just phased out and disappeared, or if this like these four islands exist somewhere and they're being kept like hushed because there's more than one map that shows this, and it's just very very interesting. I wonder if that's meant to be not sure if that's meant to be Svalbard or not, but it looks a lot bigger. But doesn't this look so different? And it's not just like, oh, they didn't know what they were doing back then. They knew what they were doing back then. It appears that countries never stay too long in the same place, at least not anymore. So I thought that that was absolutely fascinating. And I've also seen illustrations of like a castle or something crazy right here in the center where the North Pole would be. There's actually one of the places I first saw it when the ice cap existed was a Hans Christian Andersen book called East of the Sun and West of the Moon. They had this like map such as this with the four islands and with like a castle in the middle. So I just thought that was pretty darn interesting. And let's see, I found a blurb about Friesland, if I can find it now for us all. Like I found these little, where did I put it now? It was like little residuals of like how people remembered Friesland being, oh, here it is here. This is aware of the fact that some people from Holland think that Friesland is almost as far north, is almost as far as the North Pole. There also exists a North Friesland bordering blah 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 shapes and colors, and then it starts talking about the North Pole and the South Pole. But I thought that was interesting that they mentioned that some people think that Friesland is up as far as the North Pole, because that would make sense if it was like south of Iceland here, that it isn't that far away from the North Pole. And speaking of the North Pole, The North Pole is now a city in Alaska, and I think that somebody Mandela affected went and scribbled on their sign there, the North Pole was here. Because I searched North Pole and look where it is. North Pole is a city in Alaska, USA. It's a small city in Fairbanks, North Star, whatever, Alaska, United States, part of Fairbanks, Alaska. Like, no, it's not. That's not where it always was. And I'm glad that somebody's found humor in this, that they would mess up their little sign there. Because literally, that's what was. They had like a ring of flags around the North Pole, and it had this exact thing here. New York is this far, Moscow's that far, St. Petersburg is this far. And there's like United Nations flags and weird things all around it. And there was a base up there, Air Force Base. I know someone who was stationed up there, and that Air Force Base has moved to the South Pole, which is totally bizarre. But when it was on the North Pole, the Russians and the US used to stay. They had like a shared base, which was very strange. But there's so many countries that had laid claim to the North Pole and said it was theirs, that it seemed to be like they were jointly doing like military exercises there and like patrolling it. They didn't let average citizens go up there. So there'd be like Russian boats, ships rather, patrolling around the North Pole to make sure that people didn't come up. If you tried to sail up to the North Pole, they would make you turn back around and go home. So I think that's just crazy. Here's like a picture of a tiny North Pole. Like the North Pole it came down so far. Greenland was only small. Greenland wasn't much bigger than Iceland. And all of these that are now look like lakes, that was all filled with ice because the North Pole came down so far. As in, Svalbard didn't have room to exist because the ice went further than where Svalbard is, or where this big, long Russian island is. I can't pronounce it, but this island is like a new thing for me, so that was quite interesting. I wanted to say also, Friesland being a land that doesn't exist for me, Svalbard being a land that doesn't exist for me, Andorra never existed for me, but Sylvania did. And Sylvania was a country in Eastern Europe, and it was right beside Estonia, and now it's not. Now it's only a city in Toledo, Ohio. When you search for Sylvania, it doesn't come up anymore as a country. It's not there. So I thought that was quite interesting as well. Sylvania, spelt with an E, as I remember it, is now a fantasy poker game. Strategy card game with spells, character progression, and all this kind of... And also it's a product line spelt with an A, Sylvania rather than Sylvania. And when you image search it, you just get computers and products, and there's a store called Sylvania, but the Eastern European country is not there. I looked up Estonia just to make sure, and it's not there. So Sylvania, Estonia, Latvia, Slovenia and Slovakia used to be all in the same kind of block, and now it's just gone. So I don't know where those people ended up, because unlike Friesland, which just moved to not be an island and instead be a province, Sylvania seems to have just disappeared altogether. It's just not there. So I searched here, I can't find it, it's not here. And Russia looks so different to me. And I'm not going to get into it in this video, but I think in a future video I will. There's a lot of like alternative histories coming up that are extremely interesting. Like I found a documentary about medieval style kings in Africa, in places like Somalia. So this version of Africa, the countries are all mixed around and put in different places than they were where I'm from. And it's hugely interesting to see this whole alternative history, like, and how things happen so differently, as well as the Bible prophecies of the King of the North and the King of the South. Turkey is like 3 times or 4 times bigger than it was where I'm from. So where I'm from, they thought the king of the north was Russia, and here they think the king of the north is Turkey, and it could very well be. Turkey and Kazakhstan are outrageously bigger than they were where I'm from. So it's interesting when it like impacts things like totally different narratives of history, and even to the point of looking at Bible prophecy in a new way. So I'll leave that there. I just think that the disappearing, reappearing country things is fascinating.